It was the night of September 15th, 1994. The clock struck just after 10 when Jose, a 62-year-old farmer, took the dirt road back to his house. The rain came in fine bursts, drumming on the old windshield of his car, and the yellowish headlights struggled to cut through the darkness. At every curve, mud built up on the tires, making the vehicle slide gently, as if the road itself wanted to stop him from arriving. The field around him remained silent. There were no birds, no dogs, nothing but the constant sound of water falling from the sky. It was an ordinary night for Jose, until an uncomfortable feeling began to grow inside him, the strange impression of being watched. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his gaze fixed on the horizon, as if he sensed that something out of the ordinary was about to happen. Then it happened. A flash crossed the sky, illuminating the field behind the farm for an instant. But it wasn't lightning. The light didn't descend in a straight line, didn't get lost in the clouds. It moved smoothly, as if it were alive, hovering in the air before descending toward the ground. Jose braked abruptly. The tires skidded in the mud, and for a few seconds the world seemed to hold its breath along with him. The rain, suddenly, no longer seemed enough to explain that glow. The light didn't flicker like a distant lighthouse, didn't tremble like a flame. It pulsed. It breathed. Jose's heart raced. He thought about turning back, accelerating the car and pretending he hadn't seen anything. But something stronger than fear stopped him from leaving. He knew he had witnessed something impossible to ignore. As the rain slid down the car window, he turned off the engine and just listened. The silence of the night was broken by a low sound, almost a hum, coming from where the light had touched the earth. Jose blinked, rubbed his eyes, but the luminosity remained there, steady, like a lighthouse hidden in the heart of the darkness. The farmer took a deep breath and opened the car door. The cold night air filled his lungs. Each step he took on the mud sounded heavier, as if the earth itself was trying to hold him back. The rain, now lighter, seemed like a veil between him and what he was about to discover. Deep down, Jose was not a man of illusions. His whole life had been spent in hard work, in harvests, in seasons that came and went. He wasn't given to fantasies, didn't believe in ghost stories or apparitions. But that night, everything he knew about the world began to unravel before his eyes. The glow increased as he approached the field. There was an energy in something that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. The low sound continued, like a heartbeat under the ground. And for an instant, Jose was certain that the entire universe had bent toward that place. At that exact hour, he stopped a few meters from where the light seemed to breathe. He stood motionless, just watching, unable to understand what his eyes were registering. The rain stopped suddenly, as if even the sky was waiting in silence. Jose's heart beat too hard, each beat echoing like a drum inside his chest. That night, Jose understood that the universe had chosen precisely him, a simple man, to witness the impossible. The next morning, Jose woke up earlier than usual. He had barely slept. The sound of the previous night's rain still echoed in his mind, mixed with the mysterious flash that had illuminated the field. He tried to convince himself that maybe he had dreamed it, or that the neighbor's homemade brew had played a trick on his imagination. But deep down, he knew it hadn't been a delusion. With firm steps, he walked to the field where he had seen the light descend. The ground was soaked. The air smelled of mud and wet grass. Jose stopped, examining every detail around him. That's when his eyes caught something different. There, in the middle of the field, rested an object. It wasn't a massive ship like in the movies, nor something that resembled an airplane. It was compact, metallic, with a silvery glow that seemed to reflect the light even under the cloudy sky. The strangest thing was its shape. It didn't fit into anything known. It wasn't round nor square, but something in between, as if it had been molded by energy itself. Jose approached slowly. With each step, he heard a low, constant sound, similar to the hum of a giant bee. His heart beat fast, but his feet seemed unwilling to stop. The air was heavy, almost electric, and the feeling of being in front of something alive intensified. When he got a few meters away, he noticed a detail that made him hold his breath. The object wasn't static. Its glow pulsed, as if breathing. Jose stood motionless, observing the metallic surface that seemed to move in gentle waves, like solid water. Suddenly, something caught his attention at the edge of his vision. A slender silhouette was moving away slowly, almost blending into the darkness of the nearby woods. It was tall, thin, its movements fluid, silent. Jose's eyes widened, his entire body shivering. He tried to shout, but no words came out. For an instant, he didn't know if his eyes were really seeing, or if his mind was inventing. The figure didn't look back. It just moved away, as if it had fulfilled some purpose. José remained still, motionless, unable to decide whether to run after it or retreat. The silence around him seemed absolute, broken only by the soft hum coming from the object. After a few minutes, courage began to give way to fear. He took 2 steps back without taking his eyes off that scene that challenged everything he believed possible. He took a deep breath and turned, walking quickly back home, with the certainty that he had witnessed something no one would believe. Night fell again, and José couldn't close his eyes. The image of the slender figure and the pulsing object wouldn't leave his mind. Amid confused thoughts, he made a decision. He would return to the field. He needed to be sure he wasn't crazy. The next day, as soon as the sun began to set, he grabbed his old lantern, put on his raincoat, and returned to the same spot. The field was quiet, as always, but something about it seemed different. José walked slowly, his eyes attentive to every detail, his heart racing as if anticipating a revelation. When he reached the spot, the object was no longer there. Only the trampled grass and some circular marks on the soil showed that something had really been present. José knelt and touched the cold earth. His heart beat strong. It wasn't imagination. There was something real in that story. The figure he had seen the night before, however, gave no sign. The field seemed empty, and silence reigned absolute. José stayed there for a while, looking at the sky as if waiting for the glow to return, but nothing happened. As he walked back home, a strange certainty settled inside him. That hadn't been just a vision. Something had shown itself, even if for an instant, and now, no matter how hard he tried to escape, he knew he could never erase that night from his life. José, the simple man of the field, carried with him the doubt, but also a strange attraction to the mystery that had revealed itself. The following days were marked by restlessness. José couldn't resume his routine as before. The field, the slender silhouette, and the pulsing object were etched in his memory like open wounds. He needed to share what he had seen. He couldn't bear the idea of carrying that burden alone. The next afternoon, he decided to tell some neighbors. He gathered courage at the village bar, where the men usually gathered at the end of the workday. The smell of homemade country wine and strong coffee filled the air, and the conversation revolved around the harvest and the rains threatening the crops. When José opened his mouth to recount what he had witnessed, the atmosphere changed. "I saw a light descending in the field," he began, with a firm voice but an apprehensive look. "An object, and a figure that wasn't from this world." The initial silence lasted only a few seconds, until laughter filled the space. "José, you've been drinking too much of that homemade wine," shouted one of them, slapping the table, drawing laughs from the others. "Bet you mistook it for a truck's headlights," added another, laughing loudly. The mockery cut José like invisible blades. He tried to insist, swore on his own life that he wasn't making it up, but with every word, the disbelief grew. The neighbors' laughter echoed, turning his experience into a joke. Back home, he found even more resistance. His family looked at him with concern. His wife, used to his seriousness, placed a hand on his shoulder and said, in a soft tone, "José, maybe it's just fatigue. You've been working too hard." His children exchanged discreet glances, as if confirming among themselves that their father was starting to get confused. That look hurt more than the taunts at the bar, but deep down, José knew he couldn't abandon what he had witnessed. Something inside him, stronger than reason, called him back to the field. Every night, after the family slept, he grabbed the lantern, put on the raincoat, and walked alone to the same place. At first, nothing happened, just the silence and the cold of the early morning. But José kept returning. He brought food, as if he could offer something. On some nights, he sat on the edge of the field and spoke aloud, even without a response. "I know you're there," he said, staring into the void. "If you chose me, then show me why." There was no answer, just the wind sweeping the crops and the distant sound of cricket. Still, José persisted. The weight of doubt consumed him, but the hope that something would happen again kept him firm. Each time he returned home empty-handed, exhaustion was stamped on his face. But instead of giving up, he felt his determination grow. He knew that sooner or later, that mysterious call would reveal itself again. The simple man who once only tended his crops now carried within him a new mission. Even if no one believed him, even if he was ridiculed, José saw himself as the guardian of a secret greater than himself. And so, amid neighbors' laughter and suspicious family glances, he became the sole night watchman. Before we continue, if this story is gripping you, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and comment what you would do if you were in Jose's place. This helps a lot to bring new stories like this to you. The nights succeeded one another like a silent ritual. Jose no longer cared about the biting cold or the accumulated fatigue from fieldwork. Something in him knew that the wait had a purpose. The dark field, where before there was nothing but crickets and wind, began to carry an invisible tension, as if it were guarding secrets awaiting the right moment. It was on one of these nights that the first sign revealed itself. Jose arrived at the spot and, upon illuminating the ground with his lantern, noticed that the grass had changed. In the center of the field, a perfect burned circle emerged, marked in the damp earth. He knelt, touched the soil, and felt the heat still emanating from it, as if it had just happened. No torch, no ordinary fire could leave marks like. The next day, he returned to the same place. There were other signs, small interconnected circles, like symbols engraved by invisible hands. None of them seemed random. They were organized forms, almost mathematical. Jose couldn't interpret them, but he knew it was a message. The following nights brought even more mystery. One day, as he approached, he heard a high-pitched sound cutting through the air, a strange, metallic whistle that echoed over the fields. As soon as he took the first step inside the marked circle, the sound stopped. The silence was so abrupt that it made his heart race, as if the night itself had stopped to observe him. Another time, he found something even more enigmatic, a small shiny stone resting in the center of the field. It wasn't common, didn't resemble any mineral from the region. It emitted a soft bluish glow, as if it had captured a piece of the night inside it. Jose picked up the stone in his hands and felt a faint vibration run through his fingers. He pocketed it, like someone holding a piece of mystery. Each detail increased his conviction. He wasn't alone. Someone or something was trying to establish contact. It wasn't the product of his tired mind. It wasn't invention. It was real. In the first moments of these discoveries, Jose even wondered if he should tell the neighbors again. But the memory of the laughter at the bar and the disbelieving looks from his family made him silent. He understood that it wasn't about convincing anyone. It was about understanding why, among so many, he had been chosen to witness it. Night after night, the solitude in the field ceased to be a burden and turned into expectation. He sat on the earth, with the lantern turned off, staring at the sky. The darkness no longer brought him fear, but a strange intimacy, as if conversing with an invisible visitor who responded in symbols, sounds, and lights. It was a wordless dialogue, but Jose felt there was intention. It wasn't mere coincidence or natural phenomena. It was communication, an unknown presence that was testing his courage, measuring his patience, probing his mind. And at this point in the story, it's worth imagining. What would you do in Jose's place? Would you stay, return night after night, even under mockery, to face the impossible? Before we continue, if this video is being useful to you, take a moment to subscribe, leave your like, and comment below. This helps a lot to bring new stories like this to you. Jose, however, didn't need that reflection. The decision was already made. He would keep returning, night after night, with the lantern in hand and the mysterious stone in his pocket, until the truth revealed itself completely. Over time, even his fears changed shape. If before he feared being ridiculed, now he feared losing the contact, feared that the signs would simply disappear, leaving him orphaned of the mystery. And that fear of losing the invisible was greater than any other. In that September drawing to a close, Jose came to live in two realities. By day, the common routine of the farmer. At night, the guardian of sky secret. And it was that duality that made him realize, too late, that he wasn't just being observed by the mysterious presences. The village itself was beginning to notice his nocturnal habits, and not everyone would face it with curiosity or respect. Jose's nighttime outings soon became the talk of the small village. At first, they were just whispers, sideways comments in market conversations. But as the weeks passed, curiosity gave way to scorn. Jose, who had always been seen as an honest, hard-working, and reserved man, now became the target of muffled laughs and mocking glances. One night, as he returned from the field, he encountered a group of village youths on the road. They laughed loudly, pretending to gesture as if they were creatures from another world. One of them, imitating a metallic voice, shouted, "Watch out! It's E.T. Jose! He's going to take us to his ship!" The laughter echoed in the darkness. Jose lowered his head and kept walking, ignoring the taunts. But the boys weren't satisfied. They threw small stones in his direction, some hitting his raincoat. The dry sound of the pebbles against the fabric echoed deeper than the laughter. It was the cruel confirmation that for many, He had become a joke. Days later, upon waking up, he found graffiti on his house gate in red paint. Crazy old man. The shaky, poorly drawn letters weighed like a sentence. His wife, distressed, begged him to leave it all behind, to forget the fields and the lights. His children, embarrassed, avoided going out with him on the street. Jose, however, couldn't. Something greater than his reputation called. There were moments when he thought of giving up. He sat alone on the porch, looking at the dark sky, and silently questioned if it was worth enduring the community's contempt. Could it be possible that it was all just imagination? Maybe the symbols, the sounds, even the luminous stone were illusions created by a tired mind. But whenever that doubt arose, Jose felt deep in his chest that same force that had pulled him from the first night. A silent, inexplicable, but unshakable certainty. The call couldn't be ignored. The conflict with the community became increasingly personal. Old friends avoided him. At the market, people stopped talking when he entered. At the bar, where he once spent hours in company, there was now only silence and suspicious glances. Jose became a stranger in his own village, and yet he didn't give up. As the taunts increased, he realized that his journey wasn't against the neighbors, nor against the mockery. It was against the temptation to abandon the truth he had seen with his own eyes. Jose knew that if he turned back, if he pretended nothing had happened, he would live the rest of his days with the feeling of having betrayed himself. Thus, every insult and every laugh strengthened him. The isolation that once seemed like a punishment now transformed into a kind of preparation, as if life itself was testing his courage, asking if he would be capable of carrying a burden that wasn't for everyone. On the loneliest nights, as he crossed the field, he felt an enormous weight on his shoulders, but also a strange flame burning inside. The community's contempt had become just a distant echo before the greatness of the mystery he pursued. At that moment, Jose understood that his search was no longer for proof to convince others. It was for answers that only the universe itself could give him, and deep down, he sensed that the worst of the mockery was yet to come, but also that the revelation awaiting him in the field would be greater than any humiliation. Solitude didn't keep Jose away from the field. On the contrary, night after night, he seemed more determined to decipher the mystery. The marks on the soil, the high-pitched sounds, the luminous stone in his pocket, everything pointed to an attempt at communication. But if there was a dialogue in progress, Jose felt he needed to find his own way to respond. One morning, walking through the farm's toolshed, his eyes fell on an old dusty radio, forgotten for years on a shelf. It was a large wooden device, worn out, which he used to listen to when there were still local broadcasts of music and news. Jose picked up the radio, dusted it off, and tucked it under his arm. A simple but bold idea was beginning to form. That night, upon arriving at the field, he positioned the radio in the center of the burned circles. He turned it on with difficulty, fiddling with the tuning knob until the hiss filled the night silence. He turned the dial, letting fragments of distant voices, broken music, and irregular static escape. For a few minutes, just the noise. But Jose stayed there, attentive, like someone sending a message in a bottle to the sea. Then, he gathered courage. He picked up the radio's microphone, even knowing it was disconnected from any local transmission, and spoke aloud. "My name is Jose. I'm here. If you're hearing me, respond." The wind swept the field without response, but Jose didn't give up. He left the radio on, and like keeping company with someone invisible, began broadcasting snippets of songs he had kept on old tapes. He played waltzes he had learned in his youth, simple accordion melodies, even religious songs that his wife used to sing in the kitchen. It was his way of saying, "I exist, and I want you to know me." On the third night of this attempt, something happened. As the melody echoed from the radio, the sky lit up with colorful beams. They weren't lightning, nor fireworks. They were soft lights that danced in sync with the sound. Jose looked up, his eyes welling up. It was as if someone, up there, was listening. His heart raced. Gathering courage, he approached the radio microphone and said again, "I am Jose." At that very instant, the object that had remained hidden in silence glowed on the horizon, emitting a deep sound, different from the previous one. It wasn't just the familiar hum, it was a new note, distinct, almost as if repeating the vibration of his voice. Jose fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. For the first time, he felt he wasn't just pursuing an enigma, he was being recognized. That wasn't coincidence. It was response. Emotion overwhelmed him. The simple farmer, accustomed to the silence of the land and the weight of the hoe, now experienced an invisible dialogue with something beyond human understanding. An old radio, some songs, and the courage to say his name had opened a door to the impossible. In the following days, he returned to the field always carrying the radio. With each attempt, the responses varied. Lights blinking in the sky, the colorful pulsing of the distant object, deep sounds that echoed like resonance of his own voice. It was a fragmented dialogue, but laden with meaning. The nights became sacred to him. The radio, with its faults and hisses, was now the link between two worlds. Jose knew he hadn't discovered a definitive method, but the simple fact of receiving responses was enough to fuel his hope. Deep down, he understood. What was at stake wasn't just proving the existence of something beyond Earth. It was the intimate feeling of being heard, of not being alone in the universe. And that for him was worth more than any material proof. The community's contempt, the taunts, and even the solitude ceased to have weight. For there, under the starry sky and in the company of the hissing radio, Jose discovered a bond greater than all the human ties that had abandoned him. And it was in that unlikely space of communion that something even deeper was preparing to happen. Time advanced slowly since the first contact with the radio. Jose's nights had become part of a ritual that no longer seemed strange to him, but natural, as if he had been born for it. Every sound, every light that responded to his attempts reinforced the feeling that something greater was underway. But nothing would prepare him for what would happen on the night of October 22nd, 1994. The sky was clear as it rarely was in that region. The clouds had vanished, and an entire constellation opened above his head, sparkling like a black glass mantle studded with diamonds. Jose walked through the field with firm steps, the old radio under his arm and the lantern in hand. But that night, he felt he wouldn't need artificial light. The sky itself seemed to guide him. As he approached the circle marked on the ground, he noticed that something was already different. The object that had pulsed from afar now glowed intensely, as if waiting for him. Jose stopped for a moment, his breathing quickened, his body taken by a mix of fear and expectation. The air was heavy, vibrating almost audibly. Suddenly, the deep sound echoed stronger than ever. The object began to open slowly, as if metallic petals were unfolding in silence. From the interior emanated a deep bluish light, almost liquid, that illuminated the entire night. Jose raised his hand to his face, trying to shield his eyes, but soon lowered his palm. He wanted to see. He wanted to etch every detail into his memory. That's when the figure appeared. A humanoid being, tall, slender, with smooth movements, descended from the ship's interior as if sliding through the air. There was no threat in its posture, no weapon, no abrupt gesture, just observation. Its eyes, large and dark, reflected the blue light, conveying a strange calm. Jose stood paralyzed. His heart beat so hard he thought he would faint. He tried to take a step back, but his feet refused to obey. The figure continued to advance slowly until it stopped a few meters away. There were no words, no sound, just the presence. And it was in that silence that it happened. A voice arose, not from the air, not from the being's lips, but from inside Jose's mind. A firm, clear voice, resonating as if born in the depths of his soul. Jose. He staggered, tears welling up uncontrollably. That wasn't just a loose word. It was his name, the name he had carried since childhood, now returned to him by the universe. Jose fell to his knees. There was no way to deny it. It wasn't madness. It wasn't illusion. That was real. The being remained motionless, but its presence filled the entire field, as if the world had shrunk until only the two remained. Do not be afraid. The voice echoed again, soft, deep, laden with an impossible human serenity. Jose's tears fell onto the wet mud. For the first time, he felt he wasn't alone in the universe, that his simple life, marked by nights of work and days of harvest, had been chosen for something extraordinary. The silence returned to stretch out, but now it was no longer oppressive. It was like a sacred space between two presences that recognized each other. Jose breathed with difficulty, trying to contain the emotion. The figure didn't move, just observed, as if waiting for him to assimilate the moment. And Jose understood. He didn't need proof. He didn't need witnesses. That wasn't for convincing anyone. It was for him. The universe had revealed itself directly in his life, breaking all boundaries of what he thought possible. For an instant, he thought of the village, the laughter, the taunts, the words painted on his gate. All of that now seemed too small before what his eyes saw and his mind received. There, under the blue light, before the being that had called him by name, Jose was no longer just an isolated farmer. He was a witness to the impossible, and, for the first time, he didn't care if the world would believe it or not, for he already knew the truth. The figure before Jose didn't advance further. It just remained there, motionless, illuminated by the blue glow that expanded in gentle waves. The silence wasn't empty. It was dense, full of invisible meaning. Jose, still kneeling, felt his entire body tremble, but not from fear. It was reverence, as if he were before something sacred. Suddenly, images began to invade his mind. They didn't come from outside, weren't projected on a sky or an object. They arose from within, clear as vivid dreams, but sharper than any memory. First, distant stars, swirling in infinite space. Galaxies opened before him, showing the unfathomable vastness of the universe. It was as if he had been torn from his small life and placed at the heart of immensity. Then, the visions changed. Jose saw men and women walking in cities he didn't recognize. They were human, but more advanced, surrounded by shining structures, clean energy, vehicles gliding through the air, a future humanity, peaceful and wise, living in harmony with the planet itself. The vision made his eyes well up again. That wasn't childish fantasy, but a promise that something greater was reserved for the human race. Then, the images grew darker. Jose saw wars, destruction, cities in flames. He saw rivers drying up, forests burning, crowds running in despair. He felt in his chest the weight of collective pain, as if he were experiencing the agony of millions at once. The voice returned to his mind, firm and calm. Many are not ready. Few will understand. Jose squeezed his eyes shut, trying to resist the intensity of it. Tears streamed, and his hands trembled. The being, however, showed no haste. It observed, as if silence was part of the teaching. Do not tell everything, the voice insisted, deep, echoing inside him. Not everyone can hear. Many will laugh. Others will fear. What you saw must be kept. The choice is yours. Jose took a deep breath, struggling to absorb the meaning of those words. All his life, he had been a simple man, of few words, accustomed to hard work and the field's routine. Now, however, he carried within him a secret that could change how humanity saw itself. In that instant, he understood that his mission wasn't to prove anything to anyone. It was to carry the weight of truth in silence, preserving what had been entrusted to him. The being had deposited in not just a revelation, but also a responsibility. Jose lowered his head in a sign of acceptance. When he raised his eyes again, he saw that the figure was slowly retreating toward the bluish light of the object. The glow began to dim, as if being absorbed inward, until only the field's darkness and the distant sound of crickets resuming the night remained. On the ground, however, something had changed. In the center of the circle, a burned symbol remained marked in the earth, an unknown geometric form, engraved as if it were a seal. Beside it rested the luminous stone that Jose had found before, now even more intense in its vibration. He picked it up with his hands, feeling the energy course through his fingers, and understood. It wasn't just an object, it was a silent proof, a material link to what had happened. But more than that, it was a reminder that the universe had trusted him. That night, Jose returned home in silence, without looking back, his heart heavy with what he had witnessed, but also strengthened by the certainty of having been chosen. He knew that from then on, his life would never be the same. No matter what the community said, no matter if they called him crazy, he carried within him a secret and a choice. After the night of October 22nd, Jose was no longer the same. The man who once carried doubts and sought answers now walked in silence, but with a serenity he had never had before. The luminous stone rested on the table beside his bed, like a discreet beacon reminding him, night after night, of the impossible encounter that only he knew. In the village, the taunts didn't stop. The youths continued to laugh in hiding. Some still drew strange signs on his house gate, as if it were a joke that never lost its charm. But Jose no longer reacted. He didn't respond, didn't try to justify himself. He kept everything in silence. His wife noticed the change. He was no longer a man consumed by the anxiety to prove something, nor by the anger of being discredited. Now, there was a different glow in him, a deeper gaze, as if contemplating something no one else could see. One night, while watching him on the porch, she asked, "Jose, why do you smile so much alone?" He just looked at her and said, "Because I know." He didn't explain. He didn't need to. In the field, the nighttime routine continued. Jose still visited the spot, sat among the marked circle, and observed the sky. But he no longer desperately sought signs. He didn't need the object to appear anymore, nor the lights to respond to the radio. The The simple fact of having been called by name, of having seen and heard, was enough. It was as if he had received a revelation so intimate that no external proof could match it. The night's silence became a companion. He looked at the stars and, instead of question, cultivated gratitude. The universe had entrusted him with a secret, and he had accepted the responsibility of carrying it. In the community, life went on. The harvests came, local parties happened, the laughs continued. But Jose no longer let himself be shaken. He knew that to everyone, he would just be the crazy old ET man. And, in a way, he accepted that role. For deep down, he understood that truth wasn't for everyone. Small changes began to sprout in his life. Jose became more patient, more generous with neighbors, more attentive to the simple details of daily life, not because he sought approval, but because he understood that something greater was watching him, a presence that didn't need temples or stages, just hearts willing to believe in the impossible. On a serene afternoon, sitting on his house porch, he contemplated the reddened sky of sunset. A discreet smile appeared on his lips. Everyone still laughed at him, but only Jose knew the truth. Only he carried the weight and the blessing of having been called by name by the universe itself. The blue stone rested in his pocket, warm against the fabric, as if pulsing in unison with his heart. To others, it was just a strange piece of glass. To him, it was the key to a night that had changed everything. And so, Jose aged in silence, maintaining the serenity of someone who didn't need to prove anything. His story became legend among a few, joke for many, but eternal secret for him. On that late afternoon, with the wind gently swaying the trees and the crickets preparing to take over the night, Jose raised his eyes to the starry sky and whispered to himself, "I know," and that was enough. Everyone laughed at him, but only Jose knew that the universe had called him by name. If this story made you reflect, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share with someone who needs to hear this. And tell me in the comments, do you believe encounters like this have already happened near us? Your opinion matters.